Hello, goblins, ghouls, and ghosts. Welcome to the Creatures of the Night book tag. The Creatures of the Night tag was created by Kaytastic, and I was tagged by absolutely no one because, as you all know, I sort of just go off and do my own thing on BookTube, and so far the tag police haven't showed up at my door, so I think we're all good. This book tag asks readers to compile a list of book recommendations that feature various creatures of the night, including some creatures that I wouldn't quite consider of the night, but tomato. I am probably not going to be talking about every creature on Kaytastic's original list because I haven't read books about every creature on Kaytastic's original list, and I don't want to pretend like I have. The order is going to be slightly different from the original video because I like to work my way up. And lastly, I reserve the right to talk about more than one book per category because that is how I roll. We cool? Fairies, fairies, fairies. For Fairies, I was torn between recommending Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke because I just love it so much, and the author's other work, which is a collection of short stories called The Ladies of Grace Adieu and Other Stories. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is really, really long and not very accessible to people who don't like reading long books. We're going with The Ladies of Grace Adieu and Other Stories by Susanna Clarke. The fairies in this one are just so malicious and chaotic. I absolutely love them. Aliens, aliens. There were two books that immediately sprang to mind when I saw aliens on the list, and I can't quite decide which one I want to talk about more, so I'm gonna talk about both of them. The first is Adaptation by Malinda Lo. It is a young adult sci-fi novel that involves Area 51, so it's perfect and totally deserves to be on this list. Also, it features a bisexual teen who actually uses the word bisexual, so yay, representation! The second book that I also want to recommend is Awoken by Serra Elinsen. This is a parody of a young adult's paranormal romance, and it features a teen falling in love with the cosmic god Cthulhu from H.P. Lovecraft. It's glorious. It also points out a lot of problematic tropes in paranormal romance, as well as just some cliches, and it makes you think while making you laugh. Witches, witches, witches. When I saw that witches were on this list, my initial reaction was, but I haven't read a single book about witches. Ever. I can't say why that was my initial reaction because it's just blatantly untrue. I've read plenty of books about witches. Plenty of books about witches. I don't know what I was thinking. And yet it took me hours to think of a book to recommend. And then once I thought of that book, I thought about all the other books I've read that featured witches, and I felt very, very silly. But I'm gonna go ahead and recommend Akata Witch because I read it this year. It's a young adult's fantasy story about a young girl who discovers she has magical powers. It's a very unique take on witches and witchcraft and magical kids, and I like magical kids stories, so yeah. Ghosts. 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 For Ghosts, I am not going to be recommending Beloved by Toni Morrison because even though that was the first book that jumped to mind, I do not think it is the type of book this list is looking for. Also, the ghost thing is, it's not like a creature of the night type book, even though ghosts are sort of involved. It's just not. So I'm not recommending Beloved. I mean, I would recommend Beloved in other videos, but not this specific video, but I just kind of wanted to mention that that was the first one I thought about. My official recommendation is Scary Stories. Yes, the collection of ghostly tales that pretty much every kid my age read when they were in elementary school. Okay, maybe not every kid, but a lot of kids in my generation have read this book, or books. I think it's a series. See, I don't remember a whole lot about Scary Stories besides the fact that they absolutely terrified me and that there were ghost stories. Werewolves. 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 Yes, I enjoyed Sharp Teeth last year, but that had a lot more to do with the fact that it's a book about werewolf gangs in LA written in free verse than the fact that there are werewolves in it. Given the books I've read, I'm going to recommend Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater, which is in fact a young adult's paranormal romance book about werewolves. I generally do not like paranormal romance, but my reasons for that is a rant for another day. However, I'm recommending Shiver because I think, while I can't speak for the entire trilogy because I haven't finished it, Shiver does paranormal romance pretty well. I wouldn't say the characters are particularly memorable, but the take on werewolves is very memorable, and the relationship is, from what I remember, I read this a few years ago, it is enjoyable to read. Vampires. You may be thinking that I'm going to recommend more than one book for this category, but I'm not. I am only going to recommend one. And my one recommendation for vampires would have to be, hands down, The Gilda Stories by Joel Gomez. Some of you may remember this from last year. I love it so much. I think it is probably my favorite vampire book ever. I'm not sure if it's gonna get any better than The Gilda Stories. I don't think there's gonna be a book out there that I discover that I love more than The Gilda Stories that features vampires, because it is just so good. Also, queer vampire women of color. Yay! Someone please, please, please make a Gilda Stories web series, or miniseries, or TV show, or movie, musical, something. I need these things in my life.